Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. I'm a real-world Boeing 777 pilot, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to fly the 777 in a crosswind, or most importantly how to land it in a crosswind. This is a really interesting technique, and it is a huge machine to be doing this with, so it's a good bit of fun to give it a go in the simulator, and its techniques are quite different to that of the Airbus. So in this video I'll take you through a full guide on how you're going to maneuver this airplane around in strong windy conditions. I'm sure you've seen videos on YouTube of aircraft landing in strong, gusty, crosswindy conditions, and it's always very exciting to watch. But the pilots have a technique that they are applying in those conditions, and in today's video I'm going to share that with you and let you know on the tricks to getting this airplane down. Like I say, it is different to the Airbus. It is bigger, it is heavier, it is faster, and it has differences that are sometimes better and some parts of it that are worse than the Airbus, so I'll go through all of that in today's video. Like I say, I am a real-world Boeing 777 pilot. That's what I currently fly. I've also flown the Boeing 787 in real life, and many hours and years flying the A320 family as well. So hopefully I can give you some extra context on your home simulation and just give you an insight into what landing these big heavy metal jets is like in the real world in these sort of strong crosswind conditions. We'll look at 30 plus knots, 35 knots of crosswind, as well as the lower amounts, and we'll see how the aeroplane automatically lands in those conditions, which in a Boeing is a very interesting experience indeed. The crosswind limits for the Boeing 777 are very high. It can actually land in surprisingly windy conditions. You can get up to 40 knots crosswind, but that's due to its weight and manoeuvrability. It has a big, powerful rudder, and like I say, that extra weight allows it some level of control through the strong crosswinds. This does vary depending on the weight of the airplane. The heavier the airplane, the higher the crosswind limit is for takeoff, funnily enough. But as I say, today we're looking at landings where it doesn't affect it so much. It's more down to the condition of the runway. If you have a slippery runway, then your crosswind limits start to reduce very rapidly down to very low limits. We're going to be flying here at Heathrow. I'm in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 in the PMDG Boeing 777-200ER for today's video, but this is applicable to all Boeing 777s, the 300, the 200, and of course the different models and different simulators that you're using. Let's get started. So here we are, just in active pause. Excuse the engines revving. Let me just release it for a second. There we go. So we're just in pause on final approach then to land on 27 right, and this time we have a wind on the ground of, again, about 30 odd knot crosswind straight from the north, so 90 degrees off. Now, landing the 777 in the crosswind is an interesting experience. It's a big machine, and you do have to take account for that as you do this, but it has some advantages as well. So what's the problem with having a big airplane like this? Well, the first of all is if we go outside and we point it down the runway, here's the runway up here, and as you can see, the airplane is long. Remember, you've got 60 odd meters of airplane here, and that runway is only 45 meters wide. So we're now going across the runway. So if we landed like this, our nose gear would be pretty much near the center line, because that's where the localizer antenna is going to be sending the signal to, but the main gear is going to be dragging off to the side of the runway. So, let's get it there we go. The main gear down here is going to end up lining up with the left hand side of the runway, isn't it, because it's downwind. So we need to actually put ourselves, us pilots at the front, need to be upwind. The wind is coming from the right. So I'm going to have to take over from the autopilot and do it myself. We're outside the auto landing crosswind limits here. The auto landing system cannot land in this sort of a crosswind. It can do a very good crosswind landing, but it does not go up to this limit. So what we need to do is make sure that we move ourselves over to the right, like I say. Always be upwind. If you go downwind, you're not going to make it. You've got to go around. This airplane will not handle it. The Airbus, you have a little more room because of course it's much shorter, so its distance to getting the main gear off the side of the runway is further. You've got more room to play with, but you don't have that luxury in a heavy jet like the 777. And remember, this is a big aeroplane. It is just it's not got room for messing around. You can't do it. So that's one of the things we need to consider. The other thing we need to consider is the fact that the Boeing way of auto landing in a crosswind, and remember we're outside the limits here, but the airplane doesn't know that, so it will set up for an auto land by default. What the airplane does is, as it gets onto final approach, it will try and fly a wing down technique, where it will actually use the rudder to move the nose and line the airplane up with the runway, and it will lower the wing so that the airplane doesn't start drifting over to the left here, which is what would happen, of course, if it didn't lower that wing. And I will show you that. After this landing. The point is, it will start to do that at about 500 feet. If you're going to land manually in a crosswind, it's better to take out the autopilot before 500 feet, and that's 500 feet before touchdown or rad out, because you don't want the airplane lining up like that, because then when you take out the autopilot, you have cross controls, as we call it. Again, I'll show you that later. So, key thing here is make sure you stay upwind and then take out the autopilot by 500 feet. And that's better for you as well to get a feel for it. Now, you may not always have that luxury, and there is a way to handle that. Let's say you're in a windy, foggy place. You could be in Iceland or somewhere where sometimes you can't do that, or some of the Canadian alternate airports in the middle of winter. But that is the general idea. So how do we actually fly the landing? Well, that is going to be very similar to our 320 technique. I'm going to fly it crabbed, as it were. This is how we have it here, where I'm not pointing down the runway. I am pointing into wind slightly, so my wings are level, and the airplane can then head towards the runway over here. What I'm going to do then is start the flare as normal. So remember, it's about 30 feet for a flare in the 777. But I'm going to, at that point, use left rudder. I'm going to push the left rudder forwards to bring that nose around to point down the runway. And this is, remember, after a normal flare. So flare at the normal height. Then I'm going to use that rudder. The autopilot system, or the auto throttle system, will bring the throttles back at 25 rad out. So they would be lowered back towards idle. I'm using my left rudder to bring the nose around, and at the same time I will need, and I'll bring it up here, to put right aileron in. It is an absolute requirement, because as we swing the airplane around, as that nose comes left, this wing will be taken through the air forwards faster than this wing, and as a result the airplane will roll to the left. What that means is the upwind wing will actually lift up, because it's going to get more lift. And that's a very bad situation, because then the wind will get under it, because the wind, remember, is coming from the right over here at 35 knots. That will lift this wing up as well once it pitches up from our yaw. And that's going to mean that we have a risk of dragging this wing down. And it has happened. There's videos on YouTube, maybe not on 777s doing it, but certainly it's happened to an Airbus at least, although there are lots of other factors. But if that wing lifts too much, this wing will drop down and potentially scrape the runway. A really nice thing about the 777 in this situation is we have long, big landing gear, and on top of that, they are tilted. So what that means is you actually have quite good engine clearance to the runway. The 747, this was not an option, or you had to have the wings level on the 747 because you've got an engine out here. Imagine that, and that's what's going to strike the runway first. You don't have that on the 777, so a little bit of wing down on one side is not such an issue. But if you're going to have a wing down, even fractionally, and you should be keeping the wings level, but if you have one, it's better that it's the upwind wing is ever so slightly down than the downwind wing, because once that goes down and your upwind wing lifts, it's very hard. It can get picked up by a gust and topple the plane towards the other side. So let's go and give it a go. There's a lot to take in there, but we'll talk about it again as we get going. So let me just release the simulator, and we are now heading down. I'm just going to hit record on the flight recorder. So as you can see, very disconcerting to have it off over on the left hand side here, but this is normal. Another great thing is that although it's quite gusty, you can see it's 55 knots here at 1,000 feet. This is pretty horrible conditions. A good thing about the 777 is it's heavy. We are currently sitting at 200 plus tons, so we have more momentum through the air than an A320 or anything smaller, and that means that the airplane is not quite as affected by gusts as some other aircraft, and that's a really, really great feature of flying the 777 or the 787 or any heavy jet in crosswinds. They do have more momentum and more stability as a result. Okay, so here we are on final approach. Remember, we need to take out the autopilot by 500 feet rad out, otherwise it will do its decrabbing. So I'm going to do that now. Autopilot out. Next up, we need to try and make sure we stay upwind. One little trick is to put the little dots in the middle just to the right of the vertical bar, like this. That way you'll sit just on the right of the glide slope. Not too far, but just to the right. That's a pretty healthy position there, not much further. Then, looking outside, you want to try and make sure that you're basically flying the airplane to this right half of the runway. Treat that like your own little runway. We're keeping the airplane, keeping us, just upwind. That means our main gear is actually pointing at the center of the runway, which is where we want it to be. Getting it just a little bit low here, so just correcting. Gentle corrections. Obviously go around if it goes unstable or is a little too unmanageable. We don't do this if it's impossible to actually handle. Flight Simulator does like to exaggerate turbulence a little bit. Keeping myself on the right hand side, and then we're going to go into the flare.
30, 20.
Flare, left rudder, right aileron, holding the wings level, and down. There's the reversers out to idle. I'm holding left rudder and right aileron, keeping that wing down, get the reversers in. Auto brakes in, get the nose gear down so you've got some authority with that, and as you get slower, you can reduce that into an aileron. Okay, just to prove the technique worked, let's do it again. That's how we have to do things. So I'm just going to start the recorder again. Right, and yeah, Oh, the auto brake needs to be moved back to 3. So I'm using a decent amount of auto brake. There you go. That's the 777 doing its drift correction. Now that is not, that's a little too aggressive, but I am using quite extreme winds here. 50 knots is a lot. So you can see we've drifted downwind, so this is no good. So let's get ourselves back over. There we go. Somewhere we want to be. You don't use rudder at this point in the flight. We're just flying through the ailerons, and we need to keep ourselves something sensible. Now you can see that we went downwind and how difficult it is to correct in these conditions with the gusts and the weight and momentum of the airplane. But there we go. Back into being just slightly upwind. Keep the airplane coming down.
50, 30,
Flare.
20,
Rudder.
10,
Aileron. Touchdown with the upwind wing. Holding that down. Left rudder to keep us down the centre line and get onto the reversers. Gentle with the nose wheel. Holding right aileron. I don't want that wing to lift. And we're in. You know, it's a heavy airplane. It's got good momentum. It is more than capable of doing this. Now, it's not slowing down as much as I would like, so I'm going to just take over a little bit there. Do some manual brakes. Through 60 knots, reverse is coming to idle. We'll bring it to a stop on the runway. There we go. That's how you get a 777 in a strong crosswind. It is a capable machine. Just to show you my point, by the way, let's put the airplane back with that drift. Say you had about 15 or even more degrees of drift on. There you go. Something like that. That's what the airplane looked like on final approach. You can see we need to land in this half of the runway, or we don't want to land in this half of the runway, but we want ourselves on the final approach to be here, so the main gear is here. If you were on the center line, when you bring the drift off, you'll find that you're actually that your nose will swing round and be here. Obviously, all of these actions are reversed if your wind is from the other side. I don't personally find too much difference between landing with a crosswind from left or right. A lot of pilots do prefer one side or the other, and it's usually the side that you're sitting lowest in when you remove the drift, if that makes sense. So for a landing crosswind from the right, it would be quite common that first officers would prefer a crosswind from the right, because when they bring the drift off and point the nose round to the left here, then they are sitting on the side that needs to be kept down, if that makes sense, slightly nearer the runway. But again, it's not too much of a big deal. Most pilots can handle it from either side, obviously. So I promised I'd show you a Autoland to show you how the airplane handles it. So here is the airplane in roll out flare armed land 3 doing its wing down technique. It's using left rudder to side slip the airplane and keep that nose pointing down the runway, and now it's put the wing down and now it's raising the nose. We've got 25 knot crosswind. There's touchdown. Now in autopilot mode with land 3, it does roll out as well, as you can see. It's doing all of that for us, and now I'll just put the reversers out and the airplane slows down. So there you go. That's what an Autoland looks like in a 777. It's very weird, very different to what we're used to in the Airbus aircraft. It at 500 feet will just do that, point the nose down the runway and drop that upwind wing. But it only works up to a certain crosswind limit depending on the conditions. It's a much lower crosswind limit than we can fly the airplane ourselves, because you can't land with much more wing down than that. So let's look at a replay of that landing from the outside, just to show you how strange it looks. You won't see videos on those windy days you won't see many videos that look like this. So the airplane's got a large amount of left rudder in, and it's dropped that right wing, but you can see big ground clearance on that engine. I can just pause this as we go. So this is how it's entered the flare, and there is an advantage to this technique. It's much simpler because you hold the cross controls and all you have to do is flare like normal. So you can see we've got left rudder in, holding the nose down the runway, right wing down, bit of up spoiler there, keeping it down, and the wind's coming from the right. Now, this is a reduced crosswind to what we did with our manual landings, and it is therefore much more manageable with this style of technique. You will notice it has failed to get us onto the centre line. This is not a good place to be. The real airplane would do a better job. This is just a function of the way Flight Simulator's wind turbulence works and the way I've set up this video, so I'm not going to put too much pressure on it. What I really like to see is that this is doing the technique I would expect it to do. It's a little bit, like I say, strong in certain places, but again, it all depends on the conditions on the day. But the real airplane would put you closer to the centre line than this, because as you can see, this left main gear is getting perilously close to the edge, and this is not a narrow runway at all. This should easily fit. But there we go. Ignore that part. It's the right technique. You just want to be on the centre line here, ideally. So if you were to do this in real life, let's say you were landing with a 15 knot crosswind. This is about 20-25 knots. If you're landing with a 15 knot crosswind in this situation and you're in fog, I said earlier, it's a great idea to take the autopilot out early and then have the airplane do the... so to avoid this happening, because the airplane set itself up like this from 500 feet. So if we were... well, it does it slowly actually. This is a little bit aggressive, this simulation, but it will slowly merge into this configuration. If you then take out the autopilot, let's say at 300 feet, what you'll find is the airplane is all cross-controlled like this, and it will, as soon as you take out the autopilot, it will all go back to sort of neutral, and you'll have to re-crab and then de-crab again in landing and do your normal technique. So it can be easier if you do disconnect the autopilot late to just hold this technique. Just hold the rudder where it is, hold the aileron where it is, disconnect the autopilot, and then flare. That is a situation you could end up in if you were trying to do a landing in Cat 1 minima. Let's say that you want to keep the autopilot in right down to near minimums and then land visually and manually from there. In that case, you wouldn't have time to disconnect the autopilot, remove all the cross controls, and then put them back on again for touchdown. But there we go. So let's now resume the replay, and you can see there the rudder just stays in. It doesn't have to do anything with the aileron, and it just does a flare, and the airplane settles. This sort of wobbling around here is not representative of what I would expect from the real airplane. But there you go. It is really impressive to see that technique demonstrated like that. I really like that. So there we are. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video on crosswinds in the Boeing 777. This is a big heavy metal machine, and it's really fun to fly it in a bit of wind because it's a very nice handling aeroplane. It's responsive, it's quite light on the controls, but not too much so, and you've got lots of room with those engines, fantastic brakes, so it's got lots of performance spare. It's a very nice machine to land in a crosswind and to land in windy conditions. It's got the weight and momentum to sort of punch through it as well. That's all for today's video. There'll be plenty more guides, videos and live streams coming soon, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see those. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.